is a joy to introduce both Wendy Cochran and Paul Cook. There's a lot of people in the world, okay? And then you start looking at people you want to work closely with, and there's a lot of experts out there. When you look at the HLS, are nerds and enthusiasts, and it's great when, when they're one and the same. Wendy is a strategist extraordinaire, has a ton of experience in IT, and Paul is an amazing software architect. So it's kind of fun getting to work with both of them because they have a different type of brain that comes together in a really cool way, I will say, as one. So it's great to have you guys do this session again. This was one that we got so much good feedback from at Life Sciences Dreamin'. And I know it's been tweaked and brought up to 2025 because things change that fast. So it's great though to have you both together again. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Wendy and Paul.
All right, Liv, do you want to just do maybe a quick run through on any tech questions and Q&A features and some things like that, and then I'll happily jump in and get started.
So we're going to have some points throughout this where we would love engagement from you. You'll see those questions on the screen. And if you don't mind, throw into the chat your answer. We'll be able to see that and sort of gauge the temperature from you all. At the end, we've dedicated some time to a Q&A. So at that point, if you have any budding questions, throw them in the chat and we'll get to discussing them.
Fabulous. Thanks, Liv. I appreciate that. And if there's any technical issues during it, we are both supported by Liv and Sophie, two amazing folks in the background. So put it in the chat, and I promise you it's being monitored. Welcome, everybody, to today's session. Again, I'm Wendy Cochran, the CEO of a fractional consulting firm, Novosity, as well as a former CIO and an just all-around health tech enthusiast. And I'm so excited to bring you the virtual version of our session, I should say, from the can't miss event of the year, Life Sciences Dreamin'. So if you weren't able to attend, I highly recommend that you put that on your calendars for next year. It is such a great opportunity to meet with your peers and hear from experts and just get a chance to stay on top of everything that's going on in the industry. So with that, I am so fortunate today to be joined by my good friend, Paul Cook. As Liv mentioned, Paul is the Chief Technology Officer at Copper Hill Consulting. He's also the author of Your Single Source of Truth and absolutely one of the most passionate data experts that I know. So Paul, welcome to our virtual stage.
Absolute pleasure to be here with you, Wendy, and very excited to talk about this again. To your point, like we had great feedback from the last session, a lot of interactivity between us and the crowd. So very, very excited to be here again to talk about something I love, data.
Right. So why not keep Paul in contain his enthusiasm and engage here with all of you. So that being said, let's take a look at what today's journey looks like for us. We're going to cover data strategy foundations, the all-important balancing governance and innovation. And you can't have governance and innovation without, of course, regulatory compliance and advantages. We're going to look at how to overcome some common barriers, both technology-based and some internal politics and culture barriers. We're going to look at cultural transformation for data success and the important role that plays. And then, of course, we're going to finalize with how a good strategy for AI implementation and standardization. So before we get started, a quick question for everybody. And if you could, in the chat session, which you could just type in whichever bullet point hits you, which aspect of healthcare data are you most interested in learning about today? And while you're all popping that in there, I'm going to jump in, Paul, and we're gonna get started while we see that coming in on the chat.
Excellent.
All right. So Paul, we know the whole world is talking about AI, data, the new gold, the new oil. Pick your valuable element. Ethics and bias is a huge topic that comes up. But as you and I both know, in order to turn this data into value and gold for the business, you have to have a strategy. And it is not just an IT thing. So let's start with the company and industry side of harnessing and enabling a company's data, because many organizations struggle to realize the full value of their data. So what are some of the practical first steps that executives can take to start transforming their data assets into actionable and valuable decision-making tools for their company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the probably the largest step that a company can do is start a data governance initiative. This initiative will help you bring valuable insights into your business, and how your data is, how your data is doing, how valuable your data is, and then also the biggest thing, security around your data. I think when you build this foundation, right, thinking about foundations for a house, if your foundation of your house is not strong, the rest of the house is going to come down. And that's what you have to think about your data strategy moving forward. When you start thinking about data governance, I always want you to keep these questions in mind in your head. Is your data available? Is your data usable? Is your data pure? Is your data secure? And is your data of the highest quality to make data-driven decisions from?
So, so Paul, it's interesting because in the chat, the answer to the question, interoperability came up as the foremost. There's a couple of AI implementations, but it's interesting that everybody immediately goes to interoperability. So when you look at this journey and this journey map, in order to get to interoperability, can you talk a little bit about the importance of the foundation and the assessment? Because you can't connect what you don't know sort of where it is. So again, and I hear that just having come back from the Vive Health Tech Conference, everybody's talking about interoperability, but explain why it's important. These first few steps of this journey are important.
Yeah, it's part of the inventory process of your systems and of your data is part of data governance, right? It's how those systems, the connection methods, right? How those systems can be connected to, if they can be connected to, or do you have to think outside the box? Is there reporting that can be delivered to some type of external SFTP server and then delivering data that way, right? That before you can even get to interoperability, the inventories, the system, the data inventory, right? Because that connection methods, the data quality, and then the format of that data, right? We all know not only do systems talk over different protocols, but also systems talk over different standards, HL7, right? FHIR, SOAP, XML, is it JSON, right? Without that inventory of systems, to go to the interoperability first, you're going to do a lot of rework. And plus, to see quicker ROI, attack those systems, right? Once you have that inventory, you'll have higher trusted systems that you believe not only in the data quality, but have REST APIs, have that interoperability forethought of how other systems can connect. And then that's the prioritization of your interoperability. Allow that inventory and that data confirmation to drive what systems should I connect first so you can see value quicker.
All right. I think, you look at this and again, it's truly a balancing act. And there is always the tension between governance and speed. So a lot of the things that you and I have talked about, and certainly I see it all the time out in the marketplace, and I want you to share sort of with our audience, the traditional approaches have been, governance, implementation, innovation with long timelines. So can you talk a little bit about a phased approach towards governance that you recommend, and then how do you identify and where do you begin, especially when you think about your trusted data systems? And for the life sciences industry and healthcare at large, that trusted data system is something that is impacting people's lives. So there's a large amount of risk around those data systems. So can you talk a little bit about where to begin and sort of that phased approach?
Absolutely. I have this methodology of what I call is the what framework questions. What data drives action? what data can be combined, what data is duplicated, and what data can be enhanced. Now, there are a lot more what questions that you can bring, but it's asking those questions of yourself and of the system owners, right, will give you that value. So once you ask those what questions, now we'll start with the trusted systems, right? And you bring up HLS, right? HLS has many transactional systems. They have EMRs, they have ERPs, they have CRMs, right? We know from experience that EMRs, that's usually the dirtiest data. So what we want to start with is some of the cleanest data, right? To see that value, to bring that data, not only to get the systems talking back and forth, but bringing that data into a data lake, right? So you can now start to report and get data-driven actionable decisions from this data. Mm-hmm. With implementing, so now that you've identified these systems and you've kind of brung up a scorecard. In my book, I do have a method of scoring these systems. You now can implement that one system. Start with always one system, right? Because the big thing with interoperability, I think a lot of the times companies fail, is that they try to implement too much in the beginning and not keep it small in a phased approach. Start with one system. Is that data clean? Well, it's, be honest with yourself. It's 80%, 90%. All right, well, clean it up. Before you want to start moving that data, you want to make sure you're not moving dirty data from point A to point B, because then that just compounds your issues. That's why the phased approach is so important, because if you think about that, Wendy, right? If you did that for 4 systems, you try to do phase 1 with 4 systems, especially with dirty data, the amount of cost it would take is exponential.
Well, I think that's one of the things I'd really like you to touch on is, the traditional approach has been, again, those long timelines, the decision making. Granted, it leads to high accuracy, but the delivery time is much slower than sort of an innovative approach. And I think a lot of companies clearly would want to shorten the timeline and see the ability to move more quickly, but talk about how to balance those two things with governance and innovation, and how do you define those clear goals and objectives, but also making sure that you're not moving so fast that you're leaving yourself subject to critical errors and mistakes and things that can cause sometimes irreparable harm.
Yeah, I'm going to use an example, a client of ours. That we took this approach. We set up a data governance. We ran in parallel systems to get systems talking. I think what we did was we identified the scorecard is the most important thing. So we identified that their CRM is their most trusted source, because you know what they did? They put all the validation they needed when they were collecting the data. They did that work up front to ensure that the cleanest data at the UI level was being put into the transactional database. Huge first step, big. So we took that as approach. So as we were building out the data governance, we connected the CRM to their EHR. Now, it was one direction because they only trusted the data in the CRM, but not in their EMR. So as we cleaned up the data in the EMR, as we say, we got the patient data cleaned up, right? The demographical, the appointments. We then started to open up one stream at a time to feed back into the CRM and then ultimately into a warehouse. So as we were introducing, we identified the CRM, who's your champion? Keep EMR, who's your champion, right? We found a champion for each one of those transactional systems, brought them together, they communicated and started the data governance as we started to implement. It took us probably 3 to 4 weeks, which is incredible speed for interoperability and moving data around, while we were building out the data governance plan and executing on that data governance plan.
How do you see I see it a lot when I talk to folks, no matter what industry you're in. I've got my legacy systems, and again, I would throw your ERP systems into that, clearly your EHR, all of the critical systems are really HR systems that keep your business running. And how do you think about this when you have these systems that are not just legacy in technology, but they're legacy in the massive amounts of data and historical data? When you think about moving this data to the next phase for your company, how do you see companies doing it? Are they just starting, picking a brand new data lake, data warehouse, and then deciding that's going to be my clean future because this is such an enormous undertaking? Or do you see them, how do you see them refining their practices so that they can innovate going forward at a pace that allows the business to scale at the pace that technology, quite frankly, is changing today?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Wendy. And because you need to keep your business running, you need to keep making money. Need to, in the HLS, you need to keep patient care enhancing. So typically when we have a data architecture, right? Data architecture is the most important thing, right? That foundation. Typically what we'll do is put an object data store there to be able to bring that data into an object data store, cleanse it within there, and then push it off to either a warehouse or the next destination, and also feed back that into the source. So we're actually doing three things. We're creating availability of that data. We're actually purifying or creating the highest quality of that data through an ODS, an object data store. And we're also feeding that pure data back into the systems, whether it's a data lake, back into the EMR, or back into a destination system for interoperability. So that is probably some of the best ways. Now, we've done other phases and approaches, but to me, an ODS and that data architecture underneath is probably the most pivotal way to keep the business going and also the data flowing.
I love that. I just popped a question in the chat for the audience. Again, just because our poll data, we were having trouble with the polling. And I think as you reflect on that and the balance, let's jump into some of the real challenges with regulatory compliance, Paul. It's clearly a major concern when we think about clinical trials and drug discovery and precision medicine. How can organizations how can they leverage that improved data interop and governance so that they can meet the current requirements, but also keep an eye on what happens in this compliance and the regulatory changes that are happening so quickly? I will say this, it was the biggest conversation piece at the Vive conference is there's a lot of changes with this new administration, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So when you think about this regulatory compliance, what are the concerns that the industry is going to continue to face?
Yeah, I get that. I get this statement a lot. It's like, Paul, I can't afford data governance and master data management, right? I can't afford it. I'm like, well, can you afford not to do it, right? If you think about if you're non-compliant, it's usually 2.71 times the multiplier, right, of not being compliant. Again, a phased approach can limit the cost of data governance and master data management, increasing that foundation. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Mm-hmm. That data governance will also help you with policy enforcement, right? Whether it's HIPAA regulations, SOC 2 that you have to follow. That is your guideline. That's your Bible to get through all the different types of compliance issues that your company must face. So again, it's not that can you afford to do it? Mm-hmm. Phased approach is can you afford not to do it, right? As you know, data hacking right now, data mining, people trying to get to other people's data right now is probably at the highest point right now than it's ever been. Data is gold, right? Yeah. And even the hackers want the data. Even these bad companies want the data. Everybody wants your data. Look at the marketing data now that's being collected on everybody. It's just astronomical. Can you afford not to do it? That's always the question you should ask yourself.
So the other thing I want you to kind of touch on too is the importance of standards in this ability to react, and also, again, keep an eye on your progress as you go through this. So can you spend a minute or two talking about how to future-proof through standards in the organization? And then I have a great question from the chat that I want to bring into your follow-up answer here.
Absolutely. I think that we stay with JSON, right? We stay with the industry standards. Moving away from XML, moving away from proprietary formats. I think that just increases the complexity, right? Think of the 2016, right? The Cures Act, right? Interoperability was supposed to be done by now. And we're nowhere closer. HL7, FHIR is beautiful. FHIR is a great standard. Adapt those files. Adapt the common standards that are within your industry, bring them in-house, and they make the transactions of interoperability so much more easier across your business. And that's across your business, not departmental, right? Because we've seen departments have one set of standards in an organization, and another department has a different set of standards, and they're actually talking about the same data, right? It could be patient data, it could be user data, customer data, but they're passing that data in different formats. Agreed. And that's where data governance and master data management comes in again, right? Because of that policy to drive those standards. Not only will those standards help define your data better and have people across your organization understand the data better, but when changes happen across regulatory, you'll be able to react to those changes a lot faster and become compliant a lot quicker. So data standards is an absolute must across the business, not just departments.
Do you see the major tech players in the industry adopting that as they're building their technologies, whether it's the AWSs, the ServiceNows, the Salesforces, the pick your major tech player? Are they understanding that customers are it would be a good best practice or a standard to follow the model that you just said, or are they just kind of like, hey, we're out here leading the way and innovating, and you guys catch up and figure it all out on the back end? Which of those do you see?
I see a lot more of do what we're doing and not helping the business grow, especially in the health market. I think this is probably you have HL7, which is supposed to be a standard, but we have EMRs that have butchered HL7, right? They've taken the segments and the sequences and completely changed them. And then now you can't talk to that system because you're not talking their HL7 instead of following the HL7.org standards. Now, FHIR is a great way of doing things. I haven't seen anyone butcher FHIR yet, but I don't see there's enough adaptability yet in FHIR. There's no one pushing, there's not a government body pushing hard enough for these companies to maintain those standards, at least in the HL7, HLS marketplace.
Well, I will say, I'll give you some good news. It was, again, a hot topic of conversation at Vive, and almost every leader from those companies and more also said FHIR is the way to go with the JSON to the FHIR. So the good news is I do think culturally that's happening, and I don't know that people are, I think you're right, they're getting tired of, there has not really been a strong enough push from a federal level. So I think it sounds and felt like a lot more people are moving towards, we've agreed, we're going to move fast with the FHIR and the JSON. This is good because it opens up opportunities for you. So with that, I want to hit this question in the chat because it brings us right to the barriers. And Don brought up a biggest challenge was gaining stakeholder buy-in for investments into either data warehouse and fundamental infrastructure. So let's spend a few moments talking about these barriers. You've touched on a few of them, but let's jump in. We've got them all here between let's start with the legacy systems, and then jump into how to get the stakeholder buy-in, how to talk about that value upwards to the CFO suite and the people that are holding the budget strings.
Absolutely. And legacy systems, I think, are some of the hardest ways to go, right? Is, can you come creative ways without migrating off one system to another system, right? It's that creative ways, right? What we call Copper Hill, we call brain trust, right? We have a problem, we bring our people together, and we drive to solutions. Now, sometimes with legacy systems, you can't get the data out, right? Or it's very difficult. Then take that phase approach, right? Say you have four to six legacy systems that you want to drive from. Well, start with the one that has the highest value. Move that one, right? Take that phased approach again. I think you hear that common theme, phased approach. It's not an all or nothing, right? Which one's going to give you the highest value? Phase that out. Move it out to the cloud. Find a competitor that's doing the same thing. Then templatize and migrate that data.
Okay.
Now, the next barrier with department silos, I've hit this a lot personally. It actually drives me more nuts than the legacy systems because this is political. It's in company politics. It's people within the same company not wanting to share their data with other companies because it makes them feel powerful. We call them data misers, right? That one has to come from the top down, right? Especially when you pick that executive sponsor that runs your data governance. He has to have that passion, that excitement to and tell the company this is trusted. This is trusted across the company to allow our business to make better informed decisions.
I think that's
Yeah.
I agree with you on that one, Paul. I think that's one of the biggest things that I see, especially when I talk to companies about their strategy. I think the other way to sort of get buy-in is across the different business units in your org. So I do spend some time speaking with product strategy, sales strategy, marketing strategy, go-to-market strategy. And what's interesting is everybody has goals around how to get out there, and yet when you talk to them about, well, where's the data you're relying on? And it's that commonality. So I do think you definitely have to have executive sponsorship, but the other way to do that is kind of seed and grow through the organization. And as you find major decision makers or influencers within your own company, that's another way to sort of start the energy building up so that by the time it gets there, these conversations have already happened at the executive level, so that when you look at getting that buy-in, it's more of a conversation of sharing the common systems that everybody's talking about, and you're sort of the unifying voice to say, well, here's the challenge with, we all want to use these sources, these key sources of information, but here's our challenge, and here's what we need to do in order to make this data more valuable for each of you and keep it clean and governed and so on and so forth. So when we talk about, which brings us to the interoperability, and what are some of what's the balance between building, buying, partnering? I hear that frequently. I know you do. So can we talk a little bit on
the build, buy, or align approach, right? I will always tell any company, you should never build a middleware. There are too many out there to pick from that will do it. If this is not what your company does, do not do it. This is one of the things that you should invest in. Buy your middleware for interoperability. It will allow you to pivot a lot quicker. Not only when you add systems, but we all know people change CRMs, they change ERPs. You don't have to manage a huge custom code base, which cost alone will drive you nuts. Middleware is definitely not only the best solution for interoperability. I think, to me, it is the only solution because it's something that you should not build.
So that's an interesting point, and actually, it's just something that came into the chat. But um, as somebody that is CTO of a middleware company, couple of questions that one, what do you look for? Because just like there's the reason to go with a middleware company, there's a lot out there. How do you validate that it's a good one to go with? And then the question from the chat is, what are some of the best bidirectional middlewares that are out there? And how do we'll call them the non-enterprise level, so the commercial SMB firms that maybe can't afford some of the tools. I think it was mentioned in the chat, MuleSoft and things like that. So, first, how do you look for and validate a good middleware partner? And then two, how do you do that at the non-enterprise level, we'll say, to scale and grow your company without, it consuming all of your budget?
A great question. I think you have to take it as you do anything else, business requirements. Ask yourself those questions, right? Do I have the in-house talent? Do I want to manage the middleware, or is that something I can outsource? Right? Those two questions alone will drive what middleware you should pick. Your middleware should handle all the standard data formats. Your middleware should already have pre-built connectors, right? So that low code, right? Not no code. I have not yet done a integration where there's no code. I'm gonna keep saying that. And I have actually never done an integration that has been exactly the same. I mean, I've integrated whoosh, hundreds of systems. I've probably done so many Salesforce to ERPs like a NetSuite. Even though you would think you would find, I have not come across anyone that have been identical. But asking yourself those questions, right? What's your volumes of messages going in and out of the system, right? Is it if it's not high volume, then pick this middleware now, because you have middlewares that charge by messages. You have middleware that doesn't charge by messages, it charges by connections. So you can pass as much as data as you want, but you don't get charged for all the messages. You only get charged from point A to point B, right? Those two connectors.
I think that's a really important point. And, Samuel, who put that question in the chat, we're not going to recommend anybody sort of commercially here that kind of breaks some rules. But the important piece, really, I think, Paul, as I've seen this change with different vendors, is they didn't charge for the interoperability messages passing back and forth. And then they realized, hey, it's an opportunity for us for a revenue generator. So that would absolutely be the caution when you're looking at evaluating middleware and their knowledge of how much that can affect your revenue and cost streams. I think that's
and one other thing too, like it's like how fast do I need that data going, right? Do I need it really real time? Do I really need it real time, or does batching solve my solution? And then that really does too drive your selections of different middleware.
Yeah, and I think that real-time question also can help with some of the buy-in questions, is to get those different leaders and business units saying, do you really need this in real time? And of course they all say yes, but they're, you really sort of have to educate yourself on, what drives value for the business. And a lot of my time is spent in that strategy role saying, tell me, let's validate that you really need it as fast as you need it.
Yeah.
Because there's so much happening in interactions that everybody thinks they need it now, but there's a reality that you don't. And once you really start to shave that down, it helps tremendously on the data that you can surface and the data that you need to action on.
Correct.
So, I know we're kind of, I want to just be mindful of time, but I do want to hit the two. We've talked a little bit about cultural. So the real one that I don't want to leave this screen without is security. It is the be all and end all of certainly our life sciences industry, all regulated industries, quite frankly. This is the number one concern. It's the number one topic that I've come across, at least in the last, year and a half. So can we talk a little bit about the barrier of security?
Yeah, I think right now, and data governance will bring this out, right? Is that if there's any transactional system, and we're going to point to your legacy systems up top at the top again, right?
Mhm.
That if data is no longer encrypted at rest, you need to look for a different system. I mean, that is probably one of the biggest no-goes right now that I'm seeing, as well as, interoperability. Again, middleware selection, make sure encryption from point A to point B. But as far as data governance is concerned and security, I mean, that is probably the biggest concern that I always have. And it's everything that keeps me up at night is because new hacks are coming out, new ways to get into data, new ways to listen to how data is being transported across, right? Continuous education, right? I still think, and it's still out there, social hacking is still one of the biggest ways how people get data.
Mhm.
Continuous education of your employees, twice a year on security concerns, social hacking, right? Getting phishing emails, not to click on things. I think is some of the easiest and cheapest way of putting security not behind you, but not always behind, because those are the people that are usually at the front lines of thing. And it's got to be a cultural thing. Security is a cultural thing. Data is a cultural thing. It's not a IT thing. It's not a business analytics data scientist thing. It is a business cultural thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think some of the other, some of that strategies I think for improvement is really transparency, and communication. And I find that to be a major challenge. I can't overstate how important communication and transparency is in an organization, because it also helps set clear expectations, which then leads into policy development. And those are the important things that establish trust, and both internally and externally. And I think that's something that companies, big or small, need to remember, is that your trust from the outside world is your biggest asset. Once that's broken, especially in regulated industries, that really puts you in a very inopportune space. So
I was talking to a person a couple of days ago, and I asked them that question. I said, "What would a data breach do to your brand? How would that?" And he's like, "It would destroy us." And I'm like, "There's where," and investment in data is one of the biggest things. And I think if you get the executives to think about that, right, it's your brand and how that affects dollars coming in. I think that's when they start to really get it and know it.
Agreed. I could not agree with you more. I think it's so important. So that being said, I do now want to sort of re-engage with our audience here. And again, big or small, what does this look like? What cultural strategies do you see have been most effective in your organization? And I guess conversely to that, the unasked question is, which ones haven't have been there, or there aren't any that are effective in my. So I'm leaving this up to the audience. I'm putting it all on them, Paul, but I'm sure we can help them along as they pop stuff in the chat. Let's move to sort of wrapping this up into how do you build your AI strategy, and the foundation that's going to help you be successful with all of the tools that you've just heard us use. Now, how do we actually turn that into something actionable to our AI strategy and our data strategy in that foundation?
Yeah, again, it's beautiful slide. It all starts with the data. I've been seeing across the market now that rushing into AI, now companies are being held, right? They could be sued now for what comes out of AI for their business. I think the best way to approach it is, what is your goal? What do you want, right? Taking it one step at a time, because I've seen companies just dumping data into AI. And what are you doing? What do you want from that? So having a clear objective and a clear goal is the first main thing. And maybe it's not AI, maybe it's going into ML first, right? Going into machine learning and bringing back context on how the data, how it categories, maybe scores, right? Enhancing, taking those steps, right? And saying, oh, I am bringing value from this data. Let me keep going in that direction. Because now, if you're not seeing that value, you can pivot a lot more. And you just didn't dump a whole bunch of data into God knows where and where it's being stored, right? So I think clear, defined goals of what your AI initiative is for a business is very, very important. And that, to your point, Wendy, before, is communicating that goal business wide. Because what you don't want to do is have employees going out to AI using this. What data are they pushing in? Are they allowed to push in this data, right? Are you giving away IP? Are they giving away PII information, right? Communicating your AI initiatives globally to your business is very, very important so you don't have the rogues out there.
Yeah, I'd also like you to touch on, some of the ML, AI, and the training needs of those models, and how it applies to this data, the foundation. And again, you've touched a little bit too on the FHIR implementation challenges. Again, from the audience, some of the smaller and commercial sized customers are still doing things on paper. So when we think about the models and how to train them in this foundational part of the process, talk a little bit about that for our audience and what you see.
Absolutely. Well, you can do ML without AI. You can't do AI without ML. So I always say if you can go ML first, right? Learn from that. You don't need those reasoning models in a lot of ML. A lot of those MLs are already out there. We use AWS Medical Comprehend a lot as machine learning to enhance our clients' already data sets, right? And also with that enhancement, it's increasing patient care, right? They'll be able to find things within ICD-10s, HCPCS, and all those different codes.
Mm-hmm.
Before getting into AI, that's where the big beast is, right? That's where your reasoning modeling has got to be defined. It's got to be tweaked. So I always encourage everyone to go ML. Once you get a good handle on ML, go to AI and then start enhancing that, right? And there's some great tools out there. I mean, we're using Amazon Lex with Bedrock, right? So we have an agent in Lex, which is a nice agent that includes ML. And then you can layer Bedrock behind that, which is an AI, which you have to define reasoning models to. So again, we took a phased approach to this. We brought Lex in first, got that working beautifully, be able to respond to questions, learned. We fed it, probably 5-6 years worth of data to help that learning process. But then we brought Bedrock in behind it, which is a powerhouse AWS product that really embeds AI. But that takes a lot more time and energy because you're rerunning those models. You're having those models constantly learn, and you're constantly tweaking those models.
And then what do you think about some of the data that's being made available that are, again, clinical trial specific or medical field specific? How do you see tying in or using those models that are de-identified data that is available out there? Do you recommend using that data before you train yours, or what do you see that process, Paul?
That's a great question. So we're going to go back to my Lex thing. We de-identified that data going into Lex. So I think that's important because really to get substance from your AI or ML, you really don't need to pass in personal information in the beginning. You can use age, race, ethnicity, all those common category items within HLS to really bring back value Whether it's diagnosing, are you at risk for a heart attack, right? You don't need to know the person's, the age, all that, insulin, overweight, right? All that can be done in a step-by-step process. Again, Wendy you and I believe in a phased approach. It brings a lot of value. The ROI can be seen very, very quickly. That sparks enthusiasm, especially from the top down, and it allows you to keep working that project and showing more and more value.
I love that. Let's look to, I'm going to jump into the top of the pyramid. So want to bring it home on what are the outcomes of using this strategy from the foundation, applications to consider, and then what is it? Where does that bring us?
Well, the outcomes are tremendous. We're seeing some great results in claims, in insurance data. What insurance company owes for what patients owe, right? Because we all know claims, that's a huge amounts of data, right? Insurance data is astronomical. Why not use the power of ML and AI, right, to read through that, to bring back and find those anomalies within that data set, right? Because unfortunately, I'm not up 24 hours and 7 days a week, but my AI is, and we're seeing huge improvements in billing, in that aspects. As far as patient care, yeah, we're seeing a lot of improvement there, especially with setting appointments, right? We built an application that used AI that was able to detect testing. And then if you tested positive for COVID, it would actually automate and create an encounter in the EMR, which then created an appointment, sent the appointment back to the patient, and then notified the doctor. If it was a negative, right, it would still create the encounter, right? Because the doctor does want to know that that patient thought he or she had COVID or whatever test. It could be done with any test now that they have, and still allows that, right? So patient history, all that is still maintained. But AI, we fed that about, I think, about 45,000 images, and that AI was amazing. And the client was extremely happy, right? Because now they're not having to man the calls, they're not having to man chats and all that stuff. And that was the power of AI to increase patient care, to get them to see a provider if they tested positive quickly.
Yeah, I think another outcome that is right in line with every conversation I hear in the life sciences and healthcare industry is AI as it sits next to humans. We are nowhere near where AI should be on its own, but really the importance of in that personalized care. You know, some of the outcomes we're starting to see, it's not there yet, definitely not on the provider side, with identifying and giving more time and information, putting it in the hands of the human, the decision maker. We see it with clinical trials, massive amounts of data, structured and unstructured. And I know you and I didn't really touch as much on unstructured data, so I want to bring that in because that is still a challenge for the life sciences and healthcare industries, that we have to tie into this. But you know, how important is this as you're growing stronger with your AI strategy, your data strategy, and your foundation to consider the validations in progress where humans need to stay in, the biases that are associated with that.
Absolutely. We see a lot of that too, Wendy, in the medical device area, right? Because to your point of others, they're streaming tons of data, right? AI and ML can see, okay, maybe, you know, an insulin pump, right? It's bringing back. Well, you still want a human to validate, you know, before you say, okay, up the glucose level, you know, inform that injection, right? We are definitely not there. But I think there's still ways that AI and ML can be used to improve the provider, right? So the provider's not looking through, you know, megs and terabytes worth of data, to bring that quicker data to them so they can provide patient care quicker and with greater action.
You know, it's a great point. I do see a lot of that in the med tech space with, you know, and I think this is the huge opportunity for the agentic AI, where, you know, when a device goes down or it seems faulty, odds are that data has already been generated for something to have noticed an anomaly long before a person. I mean, it's a little bit easy if a med machine isn't distributing, there's an alarm that goes off on it, but likely there was signals ahead of time. And I think the ability for letting the AI and agentic AI come in over top of that and start to really get ahead of it, that and let us be proactive about solving those problems and getting in front of it. And I think I see that huge opportunity. And of course it affects the patient care, but the reality is, you know, all technology thinks about healthcare in 4 segments: provider, payer, medtech, and pharma. The reality is the industry doesn't feel that way necessarily. Providers need pharma, they need the medtech, obviously. Yes, they need their payers, but the reality of the way the business flows and your data exchanges and the opportunity for AI to increase that collaboration is absolutely, I think we're right at the cusp of seeing AI and data being able to really transform the way this industry works.
And I got a question for you, Wendy.
Uh-oh.
I was thinking about this late last night. I was in data. If we just helped companies, healthcare companies, be 1 or 2% better, what would that do healthcare wise? Just 1, 2%, right? Make them 1 to 2% better with their data.
It's in the billions. That I can tell you. I was just looking that up for a conversation that I had last week. It's over 2 billion is the opportunity, especially in workflows. I think I see those things as they're probably the stuff that isn't talked about the most. You know, how fast can you turn a room over? You know, how efficient are you with your inventory control, your lab inventory control? So it is astronomical, the impact that AI, agentic AI, and really streamlining your data, the opportunity and the value to that is along the cost savings. I see it's going to be talked about as cost savings, but I think the real opportunity is if I get better at reducing my costs and I get more efficient in my operations, I'm going to see massive revenue gains. It's always, if I could go back to our other slide, that balancing act. You know, do you know, which comes first, that chicken or the egg of, you know, do I've got to get my house in order before I can create that efficiency. But when I do, so, you know, what is the tolerance, I guess, of my organization to be where, you know, put the investment, see the growth, put the investment, see the growth. And I think that goes back to that innovative approach of multiple streams in your innovation rather than the more traditional, lengthy, it's going to be right at the end, but it's going to take so long that it might not affect it.
Correct.
And with that being said, we've got about 7 minutes left. So I do have a couple of questions that came in. Let's see, where to go. This will follow right up to what we just asked. So many of us are under pressure to show quick ROI from the AI investments. So what governance metrics, Paul, would you recommend to we track to demonstrate progress while building this foundation?
Well, I think that it all comes back to reporting. What is important to the business? Let's take a look at let's look at patient care real quick. If we're seeing so many patients a day, how can we make it, first, is every provider being utilized, right? So now we can track utilization, right? Utilization of that. Now we know that there's, each doctor can see, so many 32 hours of patients in a day, right? Now it's all about the numbers. So, but taking one number, one KPI, right? Identifying that and then working it towards that. So utilization is always the one that tops of mind, because that's always our client is when it comes to providers. Are providers being utilized the best they can be? Are they taking too much time filling out paperwork? Well, if that's paperwork, use AI, right? How can we use AI to help them, right? Now you have that measurable. Now they're not spending an hour every evening, filling out paperwork. They're using some type of automated system to help them fill out that paperwork, push that through. That is measurable.
Yeah, I think there's another one too, is again, across the different industries, what is the most impactful system? And everybody automatically, if you're a provider, they go, oh, it's the EMR. If it's payers, it's their claims system. It's for med tech, it's inventory and ERP systems. I think the thing that I see is look at your business and see what is the most impactful system. And I'm going to give a different answer to what I just said, because I'll take for clinical trials, right? The ability to get the right patient into the trial and get them through the trial, astronomical savings and efficiency. When I look at the healthcare provider side, again, with that med tech comparison, bed management is monstrous. If my beds are empty or not utilized correctly, then I have massive revenue losses there. And then the one that's kind of harder is, how fast am I moving off of my legacy system? And, which legacy systems do I, again, it may not be those main core business systems, but what it might be is that I have 8 to 10 other bolt-on legacy systems that I really need to get rid of. So your ROI metrics and could be those investments. So don't just think about just those major points. Look at places within the operations of the business that moving your systems or getting your data in healthy, giving it the healthy foundation that we just talked about. Those metrics will get you future buy-in from the company. That helps build, we have a strategy, and it is going to be, and so your ROI can show deprecation of systems. It can show better data. It can show that your models are training. So I want to leave everybody with that.
Hold on, Wendy. You just brought a tear to my eye, because all the data architecture stuff that we've always talked about, you're hit it right on the point, right? It's that data foundation that's huge. Awesome. I got to wipe this tear now.
Okay, well, thank you. Paul. I always do. Okay, Liv, I'm going to turn it back over to, and I just want to thank everybody for their participation in the web chat. It was great to have the energy in the web chat. Paul, I can't thank you enough, and I can't thank Cloud Adoption for having us back on. I don't know how they keep putting up with us, Paul, but it's been great.
Yeah. Thank you both. Thank you everyone for attending, participating. Next month we'll be having a debate, and we'll be talking about sometimes we automate stupid stuff and how much automation is too much. And kind of a debate between sales ops and sales within a regulated industry. So we'd love to see you there. Thank you both, and looking forward to the next one with you guys.